My own son called me a crazy old man plotting with his wife to lock me away and steal my $40,000 life savings. I was their ATM until I turned the tables and exposed their dirty lies. This betrayal hit me hard, folks. If it shocks you, to share this story with your closest friends and let me know where you're watching from. I need you in my corner. I'm Henry Sullivan, a 70-year-old retired mechanic, living quietly in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, where the streets are lined with golden leaves come fall. Most days you'll find me in my garage tinkering with a 1967 Ford Mustang, the old beast my son Nathan and I used to work on together. I can still see him, a kid with grease-smeared hands, grinning wide and shouting, "Dad, you're my hero." Those memories cut like a knife now, because the Nathan I love seems to have slipped away, leaving me wondering where we went wrong. My wife Eleanor passed 5 years ago after a brutal fight with cancer. I thought I'd never get back up after losing her. But Nathan, my only son, was my reason to keep going. I raised him alone since he was 12, busting my back at the auto shop to make sure he had new clothes books and those summer trips he dreamed about. I always figured that if I gave him everything, my sweat, my savings, my own dreams, he'd grow into a man who valued family. But things changed, and not in the way I'd hoped. Somewhere along the line, my love for him got twisted into something I never saw coming. For the past 4 years, I've been pouring money into Nathan and his wife Vanessa like water into a bottomless pit. I cover $600 a month for their fancy Cleveland apartment, a place, if I'm honest, they've never invited me to, for so much as a cup of coffee. I shell out another $200 a month for groceries, from overflowing shopping bags to those times Vanessa calls, her voice dripping with honey, asking for cash to buy something special for the weekend. Then there are the emergencies, car repairs, doctor bills, or that $1, $200 dress Vanessa needed for some event. All told, I've spent over $40 dipping into the inheritance Eleanor left me, the money meant to see me through my final years. But back then, I didn't mind. I thought it was how you keep a family close, how you show your kid you'll always have his back no matter what. To make it work, I live lean. My dinners are usually a can of discount bean soup heated up in a microwave that hums like it's on its last legs. I've skipped doctor checkups because every dollar I save goes straight to Nathan. I'd stand in front of the mirror staring at the lines etched deeper into my face and tell myself, "Henry, you're doing right by your boy. He needs you." But deep down there was this nagging feeling like a rusty nail stuck in a tire, small but sharp enough to let me know something wasn't right. That day my phone rang and Vanessa's voice came through, sweet as ever, but with an edge like she was racing against a clock. "Henry, we're in a bind. There's this unexpected expense, about $500. Can you help us out?" I paused, my wrench still in hand, the Mustang half finished in front of me. It wasn't the money that stopped me. I'd sent more than that a dozen times. It was how she didn't ask how I was doing, didn't mention the week I spent coughing my lungs out, but still dragged myself to the bank to wire them cash. "Sure, I'll send it over," I said, my voice flat. But as I hung up, a spark of doubt flared up sharp as a blade. I stared at my calloused hands and thought, am I their father or just an ATM with a heartbeat? That feeling wouldn't let go. It clung to me like the smell of motor oil you can't wash out. I walked over to the old photo on the garage wall, me and Nathan, beaming beside the Mustang we just finished. I'd always believed a father's love meant giving everything, no questions asked. But now a question sliced through me, cold and clear. If I stopped sending money, would Nathan and Vanessa still call me Dad? Or am I just a name on a bank check, one they could erase without a second thought? That nagging feeling from Vanessa's call stuck with me like a speck of grit in my eye I couldn't blink away. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was reading too much into her rushed tone, her failure to ask how I was holding up. Nathan was my son, my pride, the kid who'd once looked at me like I hung the moon. Surely he'd never take me for granted. So with a flicker of hope, I picked up the phone to call him. It was a week before their 5th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to know about their plans, maybe even join them for a toast. I'd been saving up to give them a little something special, a $1,000 check to celebrate their milestone. I figured it'd be a chance to sit down together like a real family. Vanessa answered, her voice cool and clipped like she was already halfway out the door. "Henry, we're kind of busy right now," she said, cutting me off before I could even ask about Nathan. I swallowed hard, pushing past the knot in my chest. "I was just wondering about your anniversary plans," I said, keeping my tone light. "Maybe I could swing by, bring a little gift." There was a pause, the kind that feels like a door slamming shut. Then she said her words sharp as a razor. "Oh, we had the party yesterday, Henry. It was just for close of family." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, the hum of the old microwave fading into silence. Close family. I'd spent 4 years footing their bills, $600 a month for their apartment, $200 for groceries, $1, $200 for that dress Vanessa wore to some fancy event I wasn't invited to. Over $40,000 from my savings, Eleanor's inheritance gone to keep them comfortable, and I wasn't close family. I managed a week I see before hanging up my voice, barely a whisper. My legs felt like they might give out, so I sank into a chair, staring at the worn linoleum floor, trying to make sense of it all. I don't know what possessed me to open my phone again. Maybe some desperate hope that I'd misunderstood. I scrolled through Vanessa's social media, and there it was, a gut-wrenching gallery of their anniversary party. Vanessa radiant in a $1, $200 dress I'd paid for, laughing with her parents, who were raising champagne flutes. Her siblings were there, her friends, even some cousins I'd never met. The table was decked out with flowers and candles, the kind of spread I'd have loved to see in person. But there wasn't a single photo of me, not even a mention. I'd been erased from their celebration, like I was nothing more than a check in the mail. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The love I'd poured into them, the sacrifices, canned soup dinners, skipped doctor visits, it all felt like a cruel joke. I closed my eyes and a memory flooded back, clear as day. Nathan, maybe 8 years old, sitting on the garage floor, his little hands gripping a wrench as we worked on the Mustang. "Dad," he'd said, his voice serious, "when you're old, I'm gonna take care of you just like you take care of me." I'd ruffled his hair, my heart swelling with pride. That promise had carried me through the long nights at the auto shop, the years of scraping by to give him a good life. But now, staring at those photos, that promise felt like a lie. The Nathan who'd said those words was gone, replaced by a man who let his wife call me an outsider in my own family. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Henry, we're a bit short this month," it read. "Could you send $1,000 for some credit card debt? Thanks, no mention of the party. No apology for leaving me out, just another hand reaching for my wallet." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. A spark of anger flared in my chest, hot and unfamiliar, but I tamped it down. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Nathan didn't know Vanessa had kept me in the dark. I wanted to believe that, needed to believe it, because the alternative, that my own son saw me as nothing but a cash machine, was too painful to face. But that spark wouldn't die. It burned brighter as I thought about the $40,000 I'd given them, the years of eating cheap soup so they could have steak. I thought about Eleanor, how she'd worked alongside me to build that inheritance, how she'd have wanted me to live, not just survive. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, and looked out the window at the quiet street. For the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding. Was I really their father, or just a bank account they called Dad? When the bills came due, that question hung in the air, sharp and heavy, like a storm cloud ready to break. That question, whether I was a father or just a bank account, clung to me like the chill of a Cleveland winter. After Vanessa's cold dismissal and those damning photos from their anniversary party, I couldn't shake the ache in my chest. I'd been cut out, tossed aside like an old receipt, despite the $40,000 I'd poured into their lives. I kept replaying her words, just for close family, and the image of her in that $1, $200 dress I'd paid for, laughing with everyone but me. I wanted to call Nathan to hear him say it was all a mistake, that he'd never meant to hurt me, but deep down I knew the truth was sharper than I wanted to face. I was still clinging to the hope that my son was the boy who'd promised to take care of me, not the man who let his wife treat me like a stranger. The next morning I was out in the garage staring at the Mustang, its half-finished engine mocking my broken dreams. That's when Grace, my 65-year-old neighbor, poked her head in her silver hair, catching the morning light. "Henry, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice soft but firm, like she'd known heartache herself. She invited me over for coffee, and I didn't have the energy to say no. Sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by her collection of mismatched mugs, I let it all spill out, the anniversary snub, Vanessa's text asking for $1,000 like nothing had happened, the way my sacrifices felt like a slap in the face. Grace listened, nodding her eyes full of a quiet understanding. Then she told me her story, how her daughter had bled her dry for years, borrowing thousands for emergencies that always seemed to involve new clothes or vacations. I had to draw a line, Henry, she said, her voice steady. You can't keep giving to people who don't give back, not money, not love, not respect. You're worth more than that. Her words hit me like a spark in dry grass. I'd been so busy playing the hero for Nathan, I hadn't stopped to ask what I was getting in return. Back home, I pulled out my bank statements, something I hadn't done in years because I trusted Nathan to be grateful. I started adding it up, $600 a month for their rent. That's $800 over 4 years. Another $8,000 for groceries, those endless bags I'd hauled to their doorstep. Then the emergencies, car repairs, doctor bills, Vanessa's whims, another $3 and $200 at least. All told $40,000 pulled straight from the inheritance Eleanor and I had scraped together for our golden years. I sat there, pen in hand, staring at the numbers, my heart sinking. This wasn't just money, it was my health, my dreams, the life Eleanor wanted for me. I'd given it all away, and for what a party, I wasn't invited to a family that didn't think I was close enough. As I sat there, my phone pinged with an email from my sister Margaret up in Chicago. She'd heard through the grapevine about Nathan's anniversary and wanted to check on me. Henry, you doing okay, she wrote. Haven't heard from you in a while. How's Nathan treating you these days? That last line stung because I couldn't remember the last time Nathan called, just to talk, not to ask for something. I typed a quick reply, keeping it vague, but her question gnawed at me. When was the last time my son called me without a handout for cash? The more I thought about it, the more the ache in my chest turned to something else, a slow burn of anger like an engine starting to overheat. Then came the real kicker. I logged into my bank account to check my balance, still reeling from the numbers I'd tallied. A notification caught my eye. Someone had inquired about my account details at the bank, requesting access to my transaction history. The name listed was Vanessa's. My stomach dropped. I'd never given her permission to poke around in my finances. What was she up to? Was she checking how much I had left, planning her next move? The spark Grace had lit flared brighter, and I felt a mix of dread and fury. I wanted to confront Vanessa to demand answers, but a bigger part of me was terrified. If I stopped being their lifeline, would I lose Nathan for good? Would I end up alone with nothing but this old Mustang and a garage full of memories? Grace's words echoed in my head. You're worth more than that. I looked around my kitchen at the chipped mugs and the fridge stocked with cheap soup, and something shifted inside me. For years, I'd thought love meant giving everything, no questions asked. But what if love meant standing up for myself? What if I deserved better than being a wallet on legs? I didn't have all the answers. But one thing was clear. Vanessa's snooping at the bank wasn't a coincidence. She was playing a game I hadn't seen coming, and I needed to figure out my next move before it was too late. The truth was starting to cut through the fog, sharp and cold like a winter morning in Cleveland. Vanessa's snooping into my bank account, her cold, close family jab, and those smiling faces at a party I wasn't invited to, they weren't accidents. They were pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind to put together. I'd spent 4 years pouring $40,000 into Nathan and Vanessa's lives, thinking it was love, but Grace's words kept ringing in my ears. You're worth more than that. I wanted to believe Nathan was still the boy who'd promised to take care of me, but the ache in my chest was turning into something harder, something like resolve. I wasn't ready to give up on my son, not yet, but I couldn't ignore the warning signs piling up like unpaid bills. I needed to clear my head, so I drove out to Eleanor's grave, the one place where the world still made sense. The cemetery was quiet, just the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of a distant lawnmower. I sat by her headstone, tracing her name with my fingers, and let it all pour out. Eleanor, I think I've lost our boy, I whispered. I gave him everything, just like we promised we would, but it's like he doesn't see me anymore. A memory hit me. Nathan may be 15, sitting with us at the kitchen table, promising he'd make us proud one day. But 4 years ago, he lost his job at the auto parts store, and Vanessa convinced him they could start fresh with my help. I'd thought I was saving him, but now I wondered if I'd just been enabling a lie. The inheritance we'd built together, dollar by dollar, was meant for our dreams. Maybe a little cabin by Lake Erie, a trip to see the Grand Canyon. Instead, I'd handed it over to keep Nathan and Vanessa afloat, and they hadn't even thought to invite me to their anniversary. Back home, I couldn't sit still. Grace's story about her daughter had lit a fire under me, and Vanessa's bank inquiry was like gasoline. I needed answers, someone who could help me see this mess for what it was. So I called up Mr. Larson, a lawyer, a buddy from the auto shop had mentioned years ago. He specialized in elder financial abuse, a phrase that felt like a punch I wasn't ready for. I met him at his office downtown, a small place with creaky floors and walls lined with law books. I laid it all out: $28, $800 for their rent, $8,000 for groceries, $200 for Vanessa's emergencies, the $200 dress the anniversary snub, and now her digging into my bank account. Henry, Mr. Larson said, his voice steady but kind. What you're describing sounds like exploitation. You've been more than generous, but they're treating you like a resource, not a father. We need to document everything, every dollar, every call, every text. His words landed heavy like a wrench dropped on concrete. Exploitation. I'd never thought of it that way, but as I sat there, the numbers staring back at me from my scribbled notes, it started to make sense. $40,000 gone from the savings Eleanor and I had built over decades of hard work. I'd skipped doctor visits, eaten cheap soup, let my own dreams gather dust in the garage, all to keep them comfortable. And for what to be left out of their lives, to have Vanessa poking around my finances like a thief scoping out a house. I felt a wave of anger hotter than before, but it was mixed with a fear that gripped me tight. If I stopped helping them, would Nathan disappear from my life for good? The thought of losing him completely, of being alone in this house with nothing but memories, made my hands shake. That evening, my phone pinged with an email from my sister Margaret up in Chicago. She'd always had a knack for knowing when I was struggling. "Henry, you okay?" she wrote. "I heard about Nathan's anniversary party. Why didn't you tell me you weren't invited? When's the last time that boy called you just to talk?" Her words were like a mirror I didn't want to look into. I couldn't recall a single call from Nathan that wasn't about money, a car repair, a late bill, or one of Vanessa's emergencies. I typed a quick reply, brushing it off, but her question burned. When had my son stopped seeing me as his father? When had I become just a checkbook to him? Then came the real gut punch. I checked my bank account again, still rattled by Vanessa's inquiry. Another notification popped up, a second attempt to access my transaction history, this time flagged as suspicious by the bank. The name attached was Vanessa's again, and this time she tried to link her phone number to my account. My heart pounded. This wasn't just snooping anymore. It was a calculated move, like she was laying the groundwork for something bigger. What was she planning? Was she trying to take control of my savings? The last piece of Eleanor's legacy? The anger I'd been holding back surged hot and fierce, but I kept it in check. I wasn't ready to confront them yet, not without a plan. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep pretending this was just a misunderstanding. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Nathan used to do his homework, and looked at the numbers again: $40,000, a lifetime of sacrifices reduced to a stack of bank statements. Grace's voice echoed, "You're worth more than that." For the first time, I started to believe her. I wasn't just a father who gave everything. I was a man who deserved respect, not a doormat for their demands. But the fear of losing Nathan still tugged at me like a loose bolt I couldn't tighten. Could I really draw a line without losing my son forever? Or was I holding on to a version of him that didn't exist anymore? Those questions swirled in my head, but Vanessa's latest move at the bank told me one thing. Whatever game she was playing, I needed to be ready for the next round. Vanessa's latest move, trying to link her phone number to my bank account, lit a fire in me that I couldn't put out. It wasn't just snooping anymore. It was a calculated step, like a thief testing the locks before breaking in. Her cold, close family jabbed, the $40,000 I'd poured into their lives, the party I wasn't invited to. It all swirled in my head, a storm I couldn't ignore. Mr. Larson's words about exploitation echoed, and Grace's advice. "You're worth more than that," was starting to feel like a lifeline. I wasn't ready to confront Nathan and Vanessa yet, but I knew I had to protect myself. If they were bold enough to dig into my finances, what else were they capable of? That question gnawed at me, sharp and relentless, pushing me to act before their next move. I called a locksmith the next day, my hands still shaking from the bank notification. By noon, new deadbolts were on every door, their shiny brass a small rebellion against the trust I'd given away too easily. Mr. Larson suggested a security system, So I had cameras installed, small blinking eyes watching the front porch and living room. It felt strange turning my home into a fortress, but after Vanessa's bank stunt, I wasn't taking chances. I kept thinking about the $800 in rent, the $8,000 in groceries, the $3,200 in emergencies I'd covered, $40,000 of Eleanor's legacy gone. I'd eaten canned soup and skipped doctor visits to keep them afloat, and now they were circling like vultures. The thought of losing Nathan still tore at me, but the fear was giving way to something fiercer, a need to stand my ground. That afternoon, I came home early from the hardware store, my arms full of tools to keep working on the Mustang. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart stopped. Nathan's beat-up sedan was parked out front right next to Vanessa's shiny SUV. I hadn't given them a key since the locks changed, but I'd trusted them with a spare years ago, back when I thought family meant everything. My stomach churned as I crept toward the house, the new cameras silently recording. Through the living room window, I saw them, Nathan hunched over my desk, rifling through my bank statements, and Vanessa pacing, her voice low and urgent. "Find the account numbers," she hissed. "We need to know how much he's got left." I pushed the door open, my voice louder than I expected. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" They froze like deer caught in headlights. Nathan's face went pale, his hands dropping the papers as if they'd burned him. Vanessa spun around, her expression shifting from shock to a fake syrupy smile. "Henry, oh my God, you scared us," she said, her voice dripping with that same honey I'd fallen for too many times. "We were worried about you, that's all. You've been acting so strange lately, cutting us off, locking us out. We thought you might need help sorting your finances." Nathan nodded, but his eyes stayed glued to the floor, just like they did when he was a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Worried," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "You're digging through my bank statements, Vanessa. That's not worry, that's theft." I stepped closer, my hands clenched, and noticed a folder on the desk, one I'd never seen before. I grabbed it before Vanessa could, flipping it open. Inside was a letter typed up neat and official saying, "I, Henry Sullivan, agreed to transfer my savings to Nathan and Vanessa for safekeeping." My signature was at the bottom, but I'd never signed it. It was a forgery, plain as day, and my blood ran cold. "You faked my signature," I said, holding the letter up, my voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just take everything I've got?" Vanessa's smile faltered, but she doubled down. "Henry, you're not yourself," she said, stepping closer, her hand reaching out like she could calm me. "We're just trying to protect you. You're getting older, and all this stress, it's not good for you." Nathan finally looked up, his voice weak, rehearsed. "Dad, we're family. We're just looking out for you." But his words felt hollow, like a script Vanessa had fed him. I thought of the boy who'd promised to take care of me, the one who'd sat with me in the garage dreaming about fixing cars together. That boy was nowhere in this room. All I saw was a man too weak to stand up to his wife, letting her trample the father who'd given him everything. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You don't break into my house, forge my signature, and call it family." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her fake concern melting into something colder. "Henry, you're making a big mistake," she said, grabbing her purse. Nathan hesitated like he wanted to say something, but followed her out, his shoulders slumped. As the door slammed shut, I stood there, the forged letter still in my hand, my heart pounding. The cameras had caught it all, every word, every move. That footage was my ace in the whole proof of their betrayal, but it didn't ease the pain. I'd built my life around Nathan, and now he was part of a scheme to strip me bare. I sank into my chair, the folder open in front of me, and thought of Eleanor. She'd always said, "Henry, don't let anyone walk over you, not even family." I'd ignored that advice for too long, thinking love meant saying yes to every demand. But this was different. Vanessa wasn't just after my money. She was after my dignity, my freedom, and Nathan, my own son, was letting her. The anger burned hotter now, not just a spark, but a flame I couldn't douse. I was done being their doormat, done letting them bleed me dry. But as I looked at the Mustang through the garage window, its chrome glinting in the fading light, a question hit me harder than ever. If I fought back, would I lose Nathan forever? Or was the son I loved already gone buried under Vanessa's schemes? The image of that forged letter, my signature scrawled across it, like a betrayal in ink, burned in my mind. Catching Nathan and Vanessa rifling through my papers, Plotting to take my savings was a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. I'd given them $40,000 over 4 years rent, groceries, that $1 and $200 dress, and they repaid me by breaking into my home, treating me like a mark in their con game. The security cameras had caught it all, my ace in the hole, but the victory felt hollow. I kept seeing Nathan's slumped shoulders as he followed Vanessa out, his silence louder than any apology. Was the boy who'd promised to take care of me gone for good? I wanted to believe he was still in there somewhere. But Vanessa's schemes were piling up faster than I could process. Her bank inquiries, her fake concern, and now that forged letter. What was next? That question hung over me like a dark cloud, heavy with the promise of worse to come. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with what I'd seen. The next morning, I called Mr. Larson, my lawyer, and sent him the camera footage. "Henry, this is serious," he said, his voice grim. "Breaking into your home, forging your signature, it's not just manipulation, it's criminal. We need to be ready for their next move." His words hit hard, but they also lit a spark of determination. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, for the life Eleanor and I had built. But the fear of losing Nathan forever still clawed at me like a loose bolt rattling in an engine I couldn't fix. I kept picturing his face, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, and wondered if I was about to lose the only family I had left. A few days later, the storm broke. My phone rang, and it was Vanessa, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness I'd come to dread. "Henry, we're so sorry about the other day," she said, smooth as ever. "We were just worried about you. Can we talk?" I didn't buy it. Not after the forged letter, but before I could respond, she pivoted. "The landlord's on our case again, Henry. We're $1, $200 behind on rent. You wouldn't let us get evicted, would you?" The nerve of her asking for money days after breaking into my house sent a surge of anger through me. I wanted to call her out, to throw that forged letter in her face, but Mr. Larson had warned me to keep my cards close. "I'm done bailing you out, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "You've got to figure this one out yourselves." Her silence on the other end was deafening, and when she finally spoke, her tone was cold. "You're making a mistake, Henry. We're family." That same afternoon, a knock at my door startled me. It was Mrs. Foster, a social worker, clutching a clipboard and wearing a concerned frown. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm here for a wellness check," she said, her eyes scanning my living room like she was looking for clues. "We've had reports you're not taking care of yourself, hoarding medications, acting erratically." My heart sank. Hoarding medications? I hadn't taken anything stronger than aspirin in years. Then it hit me, Vanessa. She'd gone to my pharmacy, tried to get the pharmacist, Mr. Miller, to sign off on a lie that I was stockpiling pills, claiming it was proof I was losing it. Mr. Miller had refused, thank God, but Vanessa had spun the same story to Mrs. Foster, even forging my signature on a fake medical form. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "Mrs. Foster," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I'm fine. I'd like my lawyer present before we talk further." Her eyebrows shot up, but she nodded, clearly thrown off by my response. I called Mr. Larson, who arrived within the hour. He reviewed the form Vanessa had submitted, a clumsy forgery, not as slick as the letter, but just as damning. "This is a pattern, Henry," he said, his jaw tight. "They're building a case to declare you incompetent to take control of your finances." The words landed like a ton of bricks. Incompetent. Me, the guy who'd raised Nathan alone, kept my books balanced for decades, and still fixed cars in my garage. The audacity of it set my blood boiling, but beneath the anger was a deeper fear. If I lost this fight, I'd lose more than my money. I'd lose my freedom, my right to live my life. And Nathan, my own son, was letting Vanessa orchestrate this betrayal. I went to the garage that evening, needing to ground myself. I picked up a wrench, but my eyes fell on an old photo of Nathan and me taped to the toolbox. We were grinning, covered in grease, the Mustang gleaming behind us. I could still hear his little voice. "Dad, I'm going to take care of you when you're old." The memory twisted like a knife, and for a moment I wanted to call him, to beg him to explain why he'd turned his back on me. But then I thought of Grace, my neighbor, and her words. "You're worth more than that." She'd stopped by earlier, checking on me after the confrontation with Nathan and Vanessa. "Henry," she'd said, her voice soft but fierce, "being alone with yourself is better than being alone in a room full of people who don't see you." Her words were like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. I sat down, the photo in my hands, and let myself feel the weight of it all, the $40,000 I'd given them, the forged letter, Vanessa's lies to the social worker. The anger was there burning hot, but so was the fear of being truly alone. If I kept fighting, would I lose Nathan forever? Or was I already alone, clinging to a son who saw me as nothing but a means to an end? Grace's advice. Mr. Larson's warning and that fake medical form told me one thing: Vanessa wasn't stopping, and she was dragging Nathan with her. Whatever she was planning next, I had to be ready. The cameras, the forged letter, Mr. Miller's refusal, they were my weapons now, but the real battle was just beginning. What was Vanessa's endgame, and how far would she go to get it? Vanessa's latest stunt, trying to paint me as a pill-hoarding old man to a social worker, felt like a knife twisted in my back. That forged medical form, her break-in with Nathan, the bank inquiries, the $40,000 I'd given them, it all pointed to a plan far uglier than I'd imagined. She wasn't just after my money. She wanted to strip me of my freedom, to lock me away as some confused geezer who couldn't handle his own affairs. But I wasn't that man. I'd raised Nathan alone, kept my books straight for decades, and still had the steady hands to fix a '67 Mustang. Mr. Larson's warning about their push to declare me incompetent lit a fire in me, and Grace's words, "You're worth more than that," were my anchor. I was scared, sure, terrified of losing Nathan for good, but I was done being their doormat. Whatever Vanessa was planning, I had to be ready, and that meant arming myself with more than just anger. First, I needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. Mr. Larson set up an appointment with Dr. Nishen, a psychologist who specialized in mental capacity evaluations. I sat in her office, a cozy room with soft light and a shelf of worn books, feeling like a kid waiting for a test result. She asked me about my life, Eleanor, Nathan, the auto shop, the Mustang. I told her about the $2,800 and $800 in rent, the $8,000 in groceries, the $3,200 in emergencies I'd covered for Nathan and Vanessa, and how they'd repaid me with a forged letter and lies to a social worker. She had me solve puzzles, recall dates, balance a mock budget. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her eyes kind but sharp, "your cognitive function is exceptional for your age. You're sharper than most folks half your years." Her report was a lifeline, a piece of paper proving I was still me, not the broken old man Vanessa wanted the world to see. I left her office with a weight lifted, but the fear lingered. If they were this bold, what else were they hiding? That evening, Grace invited me to her book club, a group of retirees who'd seen their share of family betrayals. Sitting in her living room, surrounded by the smell of fresh coffee and old paperbacks, I listened to Ellen, a wiry woman with a voice like steel. She'd cut off her son after he'd drained her savings for a business that never materialized. "Henry," she said, her eyes locking on mine. "I thought I'd lose him forever, but I found myself instead. You don't have to choose between your heart and your dignity." Her story hit me hard, echoing Grace's advice and Mr. Larson's warnings. These folks weren't just strangers. They were proof I wasn't alone, that I could fight this and still have a life worth living. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope, like maybe I could come out the other side without losing everything. But then came the real bombshell. Mr. Larson called me the next day, his voice tight with urgency. He'd hired a forensic accountant to dig into my bank records after Vanessa's inquiries and the forged letter. "Henry," he said, "they found something. Vanessa's been using a cloned debit card linked to your account. She's siphoned off $5,000 over the past 2 years, small withdrawals spread out to avoid suspicion." I sat down hard, my breath catching. $5,000. Not just the $40,000 I'd willingly given them, but another $5,000 stolen behind my back. I thought of the canned soup I'd eaten, the doctor visits I'd skipped all, to keep them afloat while Vanessa was secretly bleeding me dry. And Nathan, did he know? The thought of my own son being in on this cut deeper than anything yet. I asked Mr. Larson to keep digging to find out how far this went, but my hands were shaking as I hung up. What kind of game was Vanessa playing, and how long had she been at it? The accountant uncovered another clue, an email trail between Vanessa and a shady lawyer Mr. Kessler sent months before I'd cut them off. They'd been discussing securing Henry's assets long before the anniversary snub, before the forged letter, before the social worker. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment grab. It was a calculated plan cooked up while I was still writing checks for their rent. The realization hit me like a slap. Vanessa had been playing me for years, and Nathan was either too weak or too complicit to stop her. My anger burned hotter than ever, but so did my fear. If they were willing to steal $5,000 under my nose, what else were they capable of? Were they already planning their next move to take everything? I went back to the garage that night, needing the familiar hum of the Mustang to steady me. I picked up that old photo of Nathan and me, the one where we're grinning like we just conquered the world. I wanted to call him to demand answers, to hear him say he didn't know about the clone card. But Grace's words stopped me. Being alone with yourself is better than being alone with people who don't see you. I set the photo down, my hands steadier now. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my freedom. I was fighting for the man I'd spent too long forgetting, the one Eleanor had loved, the one who'd raised Nathan to be better than this. Dr. Nguyen's report, the camera footage, the accountant's findings, they were my arsenal now. But as I looked at the Mustang, its engine waiting for my hands, one question loomed larger than ever. How far had Vanessa's plan gone, and what was her real endgame? The weight of Vanessa's schemes, the forged letter, the fake medical form, the $5,000 stolen through a clone debit card, pressed down on me like a lead blanket. I'd spent 4 years giving Nathan and Vanessa everything, $40,000 of my savings, Eleanor's legacy, only to have them try to lock me away as a confused old man. Dr. Nguyen's report proving my mind was sharper than ever, and the camera footage of their break-in were my lifelines. But the fear of losing Nathan forever still gnawed at me. Grace's words, "You're worth more than that," and Ellen's story from the book club had given me strength, but standing in front of the courthouse, my stomach churned. Today wasn't just about money or freedom. It was about proving I was still Henry Sullivan, the man who'd raised a son alone, who'd built a life with calloused hands and a stubborn heart. But what was Vanessa's endgame? How far would she and Nathan go to take everything I had left? Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension, the wooden benches creaking under the weight of onlookers. Nathan sat across the room, his eyes fixed on the floor, just like when I'd caught him rifling through my papers. Vanessa, dressed in a sharp black blazer, looked every bit the grieving daughter-in-law, her face a mask of fake concern. Their lawyer, Mr. Kessler, stood tall, his voice smooth and confident as he opened the case. "Your Honor," he began, "Henry Sullivan is a vulnerable elderly man manipulated by opportunistic neighbors into cutting off his loving family. His erratic behavior, canceling financial support, installing excessive security cameras, shows a clear mental decline. We're here to protect him, to ensure his finances are managed by those who care most, his son and daughter-in-law." His words twisted the truth like a bent wrench, and I felt my fists clench. Vulnerable, manipulated. I'd given them $28, $800 in rent, $8,000 in groceries, $200 in emergencies, and they'd repaid me with lies and a forged signature. Mr. Larson, my lawyer, leaned over, his voice low. "Stay calm, Henry. We've got this." But as Vanessa took the stand, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears, I felt a chill. "Henry's been like a father to me," she said, her voice trembling. "It breaks my heart to see him change, like this, pushing us away, acting paranoid. We just want to help him get the care he needs." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, and the room seemed to buy it. My heart sank. Could they really pull this off? Mr. Larson stood for the cross-examination, his voice steady but sharp. "Mrs. Sullivan, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. "We talk about lots of things," she stammered. "Can you name a specific date?" Larson pressed. She couldn't, her face flushing as she fumbled for an answer. "Is it true you and your husband held an anniversary party without inviting my client?" he continued. "It was a small event," she said, her voice tight. "And is it true you told him it was for close family, despite him funding your lifestyle for years, including the $1, $200 dress you wore that day?" The courtroom murmured, and Vanessa's mask slipped, her eyes darting to Nathan, who still wouldn't look up. She had no answer, and the silence was damning. Nathan was next, and seeing him on the stand swearing to tell the truth felt like a knife through my heart. This was the boy I'd raised alone, the one who'd promised to take care of me. "Dad's always been generous," he said, his voice low, rehearsed. "But lately he's been irrational, cutting us off, locking us out. We think he's being manipulated by his neighbor Grace." His words stung, but they were hollow, and Mr. Larson pounced. "Mr. Sullivan, how much money has your father given you over the past 4 years?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know exactly," he mumbled. Does $40,000 sound right? Larson asked. Maybe Nathan admitted, his voice barely audible. And how many times have you visited him without asking for money? The silence was deafening and Nathan's face reddened as he looked away. Is it true you broke into his home and searched his private papers? Larson pressed. Nathan's "we were worried" sounded like a lie even to my ears. The tide turned when Mr. Larson called our witnesses. Grace took the stand, her voice steady as she described my clarity, my kindness, the way I'd rebuilt my life after Eleanor's death. Henry's not confused, she said. He's a man who's finally standing up for himself. Ellen from the book club spoke next, sharing her own story of cutting off a manipulative son. Henry's sharper than most, she said, and he's surrounded by people who value him, not his wallet. Dr. Nguyen presented her evaluation, her voice calm and authoritative. Mr. Sullivan's cognitive function is exceptional, she said, holding up her report. His decisions are rational, driven by a clear understanding of his situation. The courtroom was quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my heart pounding, but my head clear. I looked at Nathan, hoping for a flicker of the boy I'd raised, but his eyes stayed down. I took a deep breath and began. For 4 years, I gave my son and his wife everything, $40,000 of my savings, Eleanor's legacy. I ate canned soup, skipped doctor visits, thinking it was love. But they cut me out of their lives, broke into my home, forged my signature to take my money. I thought I was their father, but I was just a bank account to them. My voice cracked, but I kept going. I'm not confused, Your Honor. I'm heartbroken, but I'm done letting them walk over me. I deserve better. Mr. Larson saved the best for last. He played the camera footage from my living room, showing Nathan and Vanessa digging through my papers, her voice clear. Find the account numbers. The courtroom gasped as he presented the forged letter, my signature faked in black ink. This isn't protection, Larson said, his voice ringing. This is exploitation, plain and simple. Kessler tried to spin it, claiming I'd misunderstood their intentions, but his arguments fell flat. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward, her expression unreadable. We'll take a recess, she said, and I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. Had I done enough, or would Vanessa's lies somehow win? As we waited, I sat with Grace and Ellen, their hands on my shoulders like anchors. I thought of Eleanor, how she'd always told me to stand tall. I'd laid bare my pain, my sacrifices, my fight for my dignity. But as I glanced at Nathan across the room, his head still bowed, a question burned. Would he ever see me as his father again? Or was he too far gone in Vanessa's web? The answer would come soon, but I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker after my testimony, the air thick with anticipation as the judge recessed to deliberate. I'd laid bare my heart, $40,000 given to Nathan and Vanessa. The forged letter, the break-in caught on camera, their lies about my mental state. Dr. Nguyen's report, Grace's and Ellen's words, and the damning footage had torn through their case like a wrench through a rusty bolt. But as I sat there gripping the edge of the bench, my eyes kept drifting to Nathan. His head was still bowed, his silence a louder betrayal than Vanessa's crocodile tears. I'd fought for my dignity, but a part of me still hoped for a flicker of the boy who'd called me his hero. Would he ever see me as his father again? Or had Vanessa's schemes buried that boy for good? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I held tight to the truth. I wasn't the broken old man they'd painted me to be. Mr. Larson leaned over, his voice low. Henry, we've got them on the ropes. But Kessler's slippery. He might have one last trick. His warning sent a chill down my spine. Vanessa's forged letter, her fake medical form, the $5,000 she'd siphoned with a cloned debit card, they were bold moves but calculated. What else could she be hiding? As the Judge Carter returned, her face stern as granite, I braced myself. The courtroom fell silent, every eye on her. We have one final piece of evidence to review, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. My heart skipped a beat. Final evidence, Larson looked as surprised as I felt, which wasn't a good sign. Mr. Larson stood, his tone measured but firm. Your Honor, the defense would like to present additional findings from our forensic accountant. He handed over a folder and I caught a glimpse of Vanessa's face. Her mask of concern cracked just for a second into something like panic. Larson continued, We've uncovered evidence that Mrs. Sullivan used a cloned debit card to withdraw $5,000 from my client's account over 2 years without his knowledge or consent. The courtroom murmured, and I felt my breath catch. We'd known about the card, but Larson wasn't done. Furthermore, he said, his voice rising, "We've traced an attempt by Mrs. Sullivan to open a joint account in Mr. Sullivan's name using a forged signature just weeks before this lawsuit was filed. This was a deliberate attempt to gain control of his entire estate." The room erupted in whispers, and Vanessa's face went white. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide like he was hearing this for the first time. I stared at him, searching for some sign he wasn't in on it, but his shock only deepened my pain. Had he known, or was he just Vanessa's pawn, too weak to stand up to her? Judge Carter banged her gavel, silencing the room. "This is a serious accusation," she said, her eyes locked on Kessler. "Counselor, do you have a response?" Kessler fumbled, his confidence crumbling. "Your Honor, my clients were acting out of concern for Mr. Sullivan's well-being," he stammered. "These actions were misunderstood, but the judge's glare told me she wasn't buying it." Then came the knockout punch. Mr. Larson called Mr. Miller, my pharmacist, to the stand. I hadn't expected this, but as he walked up, his face grim but resolute, I felt a surge of hope. "Mr. Sullivan has only ever bought aspirin and vitamins from me," Mr. Miller said, his voice steady. "Mrs. Sullivan came to my pharmacy last month asking me to sign a form, claiming he was hoarding medications, saying it was for his health records. I refused because it was a lie. He produced a copy of the forged medical form Vanessa had tried to use with the social worker, the same one I'd seen days ago. The courtroom gasped, and I felt a rush of vindication. Vanessa had tried to manipulate everyone, me, the social worker, even my pharmacist, to build her case. But Mr. Miller's refusal was the crack in her plan, and now it was crumbling. Judge Carter's voice was like steel. The evidence presented: security footage, forged documents, unauthorized bank transactions, and witness testimony paints a clear picture of financial exploitation, not concern for Mr. Sullivan's well-being. She turned to Vanessa and Nathan, her eyes narrowing. "The request for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of elder financial abuse." The courtroom buzzed, and I felt a weight lift off my chest, like I could breathe for the first time in months. I'd won not just my freedom, but my dignity, the right to be Henry Sullivan, not a bank account or a confused old man. As the gavel fell, Vanessa stood, her face twisted with rage. She shot me a look of pure venom, her mask gone, revealing the schemer who tried to take everything. "You'll regret this, Henry," she hissed, grabbing her purse and storming out. Nathan lingered, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment. I saw something there, regret maybe, or shame, but it vanished as he followed her. His shoulders slumped like they'd been all along. My heart ached, but I didn't call out to him. The boy I'd raised was buried under years of Vanessa's manipulation, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get him back. Outside the courthouse, Grace and Ellen wrapped me in hugs, their voices warm with pride. "You did it, Henry," Grace said, her eyes shining. "You stood up for yourself." I nodded, but the victory felt bittersweet. I'd kept my money, my freedom, but I'd lost Nathan, maybe forever. As we walked to the car, Mr. Larson clapped me on the shoulder. "They're not done yet, Henry," he warned. "People like Vanessa don't give up easily." His words sent a shiver through me. I'd won the battle, but was the war over? Had Vanessa planned something else, some final move to claw her way back? That question lingered sharp as a blade as I drove home, the weight of my triumph tinged with the shadow of what I'd lost. The courtroom victory felt like a chain snapping, setting me free after years of being tethered to Nathan and Vanessa's demands. I'd fought for my dignity, backed by Dr. Nguyen's report, the camera footage, and Mr. Miller's testimony exposing Vanessa's forged documents and that $5,000 she'd stolen with a cloned debit card. Judge Carter's gavel had slammed down, not just denying their guardianship claim, but warning them of criminal charges for elder financial abuse. Vanessa's venomous glare and Nathan's fleeting look of regret lingered in my mind, but I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt in years. I'd reclaimed my life, my worth, but the ache for Nathan, the boy who'd once called me his hero, hadn't gone away. I wondered if he'd ever find his way back to me, or if Vanessa's schemes had buried him too deep. And Mr. Larson's warning Vanessa wasn't done yet still echoed a faint shadow on my triumph. What else could she have up her sleeve? I didn't waste time dwelling on it. I'd spent too long living for Nathan, eating canned soup, skipping doctor visits, pouring $40,000 into their bottomless pit. It was time to live for me. I sold the house in Cleveland, the one filled with memories of Eleanor and Nathan, its creaky floors, and chipped mugs holding too much pain. With the money, I moved to a small coastal town in Maine where the air smelled of salt and second chances. I rented a sunny apartment overlooking the harbor and opened a little auto shop. Nothing fancy, just a place to fix cars and teach local kids the tricks of the trade. The first time I showed a shy teenager, Jake, how to rebuild a carburetor, his eyes lit up the way Nathan's used to. It wasn't the same, but it felt like a piece of my old self coming back to life, the Henry who'd built a family with grease-stained hands and stubborn hope. I took $20,000 from the house sale and donated it to a local charity fighting elder financial abuse, a tribute to Eleanor, who'd always told me to stand tall. The rest I kept for myself for the life I'd put on hold too long. I started small new tools for the shop, a decent coffee maker that didn't hum like it was dying, even a haircut that didn't look like I'd done it myself with kitchen scissors. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living, not just surviving. I'd walk along the beach at sunset, the waves washing away the weight of Nathan's silence, Vanessa's lies. Grace came to visit, bringing her book club friends, Ellen and a few others, and we'd sit around a bonfire laughing over stories that didn't revolve around money or betrayal. They weren't just friends. They were family, the kind you choose, the kind that sees you for who you are, not what you can give. One evening, as I closed up the shop, a letter slipped through the mail slot, the handwriting shaky but unmistakable Nathan's. My heart skipped, and for a moment I was back in the garage with him, his small hands gripping a wrench, promising to take care of me. I tore it open, my hands trembling. Dad, it read, "I'm sorry. I let Vanessa pull me into things I didn't understand. I want to make this right. Can we talk?" The words hit me like a wave, stirring up hope and pain in equal measure. I wanted to believe him, to see the boy who'd called me his hero, but the forged letter, the clone card, his silence in court, they were scars that hadn't healed. I set the letter down, unsure if I'd reply. Could I trust him again? Or was this just another move in Vanessa's game? I walked out to the beach, the letter still in my pocket, and watched the stars come out over the ocean. For years, I'd thought love meant giving everything: $2,800, $800 in rent, $8,000 in groceries, $3,200 in emergencies, until there was nothing left of me. But Grace Ellen and this new life in Maine showed me something different. Love doesn't come with a price tag, and family isn't just blood. It's the people who lift you up, who see your worth beyond your wallet. I'd won more than a courtroom battle. I'd won the right to live for myself, to rebuild a life I could be proud of. But as I stood there, the letter heavy in my hand, one question lingered. Could Nathan ever be part of this new life? Or was he lost to me forever? That question hung in the salt air, a quiet challenge I wasn't ready to answer. The ocean stretched out before my new home in Maine, its waves whispering promises of peace I hadn't felt in years. I'd won my freedom in that courtroom, armed with Dr. Nguyen's report security footage and the truth about Vanessa's schemes, the forged letter, the fake medical form, the $5,000 she'd stolen with a clone debit card. Judge Carter's gavel had slammed down, not just denying their guardianship claim, but exposing their lies for what they were, a calculated attempt to strip me of everything I'd worked for. I'd poured $40,000 into Nathan and Vanessa's lives, $2,800 and $800 in rent, $8,000 in groceries, $3,200 in emergencies, thinking it was love, only to learn it was a one-way street. Nathan's letter, with its shaky apology and plea to talk, still sat unanswered in my desk drawer. I wanted to believe he could find his way back, but the scars of his silence, his complicity in Vanessa's plans, were still raw. Could he ever be part of this new life I'd built? That question lingered, but for the first time it didn't define me. I stood on my balcony, the salt air cool against my skin, and thought about the man I'd been a year ago. I was a father who thought love meant giving everything: my savings, my health, my dreams, until there was nothing left of Henry Sullivan. I'd eaten canned soup, skipped doctor visits, let my life shrink to fit Nathan's needs, all while Vanessa plotted to take what little I had left. But Grace Ellen and the folks at the book club showed me a different kind of family, one built on respect, not dollar signs. They'd stood by me through the courtroom fight, their voices lifting me when Nathan's silence cut deepest. Now in this coastal town, I was rebuilding piece by piece. My auto shop was more than a business. It was a legacy. Teaching kids like Jake to fix cars felt like passing on the best parts of me, the parts I'd thought I'd lost with Nathan. I walked down to the shop, the morning sun glinting off the tools lined up neat as soldiers. Jake was there, his hands already greasy, working on a beat-up Chevy, with a grin that reminded me of Nathan at his age. "Look, Mr. Sullivan," he said, holding up a spark plug. He'd replaced himself. "She's gonna purr like a kitten now." I clapped him on the shoulder, my chest swelling with a pride I hadn't felt in years. This was what mattered, building something real, not buying love with checks I couldn't afford. I donated $20,000 to a charity fighting elder financial abuse, a nod to Eleanor, who'd always told me to stand tall. The rest of the money from the house sale was mine for new tools, a decent coffee maker, maybe even a trip to see the Grand Canyon someday. For the first time, I was living for me, and it felt like coming home. Back at the apartment, I pulled out that old photo of Nathan and me, the one from the garage, days our faces lit up beside the Mustang. I traced his smile, remembering the boy who'd called me his hero. His letter was still there, its words heavy with regret. I let Vanessa pull me into things I didn't understand. I wanted to believe him, to think he could break free from her grip, but trust was a bridge we'd both burned. I set the photo down, not ready to call him, not yet. Maybe one day if he proved he saw me as more than a bank account. But for now, I had a life to live, one I'd earned through every canned soup dinner, every skip checkup, every dollar I'd fought to keep. As the stars came out over the harbor, I sat on my balcony, a cup of coffee in hand, and let the truth settle over me like a warm blanket. I'd spent years thinking love meant giving until I was empty, that family was about blood and sacrifice. But I'd learned the hard way through Vanessa's lies, Nathan's silence, and $45,000 I'd never get back, that love doesn't come with a price tag. Family is the people who see you, who lift you up, like Grace and Ellen, like the kids at the shop who called me Mr. Sullivan with respect in their eyes. I was 70 years old, and I'd finally found the courage to love myself first, to build a life that wasn't defined by what I could give away. I heard through the grapevine that Nathan and Vanessa had moved to a cramped apartment, scraping by on their own for the first time. Maybe the struggle would teach them what my money never could, the value of hard work, of standing on their own. I hoped for Nathan's sake it would, but that wasn't my fight anymore. My fight was here in this shop, this town, this life I'd reclaimed. As I looked at the stars, that old photo in my mind, one question lingered. Would I ever open Nathan's letter again? Or was this new life enough? I didn't have the answer. But for the first time, I was okay with that. I was Henry Sullivan, and I was finally home.